My name's Leonard Koscianski. This is my studio. This is where I work every day. And I'd like to talk to you today about my latest painting called Stormy Monday and why I painted it and what it represents. And it's so new that it's still up on my easel. And it's an oil painting. It's oil on canvas. It's 42 inches high by 26 inches wide. And it's a narrative painting. It kind of tells a story. It's a surrealist painting in that it's a combination of the perceptual and the psychological. It's also a visionary work because I did it from my imagination. This isn't a scene that I saw from an airplane or anything. This is something that I imagined. And when we look at this painting, Stormy Monday, we can see this very tranquil kind of suburban neighborhood with these clouds that are sort of looming into the picture, covering that suburban landscape and maybe creating sort of a sense of threat to this sort of ideal suburban situation. And so we'll take a little bit closer look at that. But the main contrast is between that sort of placid, very structured suburban landscape and those threatening storm clouds that are looming in. And they both use a perspective. They both use sort of like a derivation of Renaissance perspective, which is very rational. But the way I use it, I combine the sort of the very rational perspective with more of a psychological, intuitive perspective. So, this painting began, like all my pictures, begin with a pen and ink study on paper and using a ballpoint pen and a whiteout pen to create highlights. And, I looked at it, I liked it, I liked the way the clouds were threatening and, covering over that suburban landscape. I liked the contrast between those two areas, but there was something still not quite there yet with the clouds, with the space. I wasn't quite happy with it yet, so I did another drawing. And this one, the proportions are more like that of the painting. And I like the sense of space that was created with the clouds, where they, in the upper left, they're moving into the distance. And in the middle right, they're moving into the distance off in the left. So the distance for the clouds is over on the left, but then the distance for the houses is moving towards the right. Notice that the roads sort of point right, whereas the clouds are pointing left. And so the contrast between, the clouds, the threatening clouds, and the more structured and placid suburban neighborhood seemed like a very good contrast, a good basis for a painting, a good structure on which I could build a composition. And so this was the painting that resulted, Stormy Monday. And, like I said, it's something that it's perceptual in that, I'm trying to represent things in a very recognizable, perceptual way. The houses look like houses, though they're very idealized. The trees look like trees, though again, very idealized. Same thing with the roads and the people, and the clouds. So everything is sort of idealized to a certain extent. It's a combination of how I actually see things with how I psychologically feel about things and how I remember them. And so, surrealist paintings are a combination of the seen and the felt. The consciously seen and the psychologically perceived, combined with, memories and dreams. And it's also a narrative painting in that the figures represent sort of different stages, sort of a cycle of life. And we can take a look at that. Here's the foreground, where most of the activity is taking place. And in the upper left, we can see there's a couple that's in the water splashing. Are they flirting? Then there's someone fishing. And then, there in the bottom center, there's obviously a father pushing a stroller. someone running. But then if we look over in the shadows over there on the left, of the shadow of that house, we can see a couple that's kissing. They want to be private. All these other things are fairly public. They're very out in the open, but so the people that are kissing, they want to be private. They're sort of in the shadows. And, to get to that point, though, where I'm putting those figures in place, I had to sit down with my sketchbook and do some drawing again. And, to create a sense of gesture, because it's important for me to get a sense of sort of gesture and motion, more than capturing details. The details can be important, but I think what's even more important is just to get a sense of motion, of sort of the dynamic of the figures. And so here we see the couple that's splashing. Are they flirting? There's a man is splashing the girl. The girl's kind of running away. And, there's that boy on the towel who's watching them. And then here's that couple that's kissing in the shadows. They don't want anybody to see them. And here is that foreground. And we can see that we're, the splashing couple and then the kissing couple. And then, there's the dad pushing the stroller. So, first there's the flirting and then the kissing and then there's dad pushing the stroller. So it's sort of a cycle of life. And then there's that young man running up above that. And then, so there's the foreground and there are those different narrative elements, and they're telling the story visually of this and they're all sort of like happy activities, okay? Because this painting as a whole is a contrast between sort of the threatening clouds and the more placid, serene, more happy, sunny suburban landscape that those clouds are about to cover. And so we can see that, in a picture of the finished painting where, we can see the contrast between the threatening clouds, especially those sort of like billowy, stormy cumulus clouds in the very deep distance, and then, the very fairly placid suburban neighborhood down below. And here's the middle ground of the painting. And we can see the church over there on the left, and in the center is the cyclist. Churches are an important part of our town here in Annapolis, but then they're very important all over the country. And what's interesting is that, they're becoming more and more important. More and more young people are sort of getting involved with traditional religious activities, and which I think is a good thing, because it's showing that we're moving away from an emphasis on money as a measure of success and more towards the idea of virtue as a measure of success, which actually was the attitude of the founders of this country, who placed a lot of emphasis on virtue, especially classical virtues. And here's that church. And we can see there's a couple coming out of the church with a priest behind them. Okay, so you've got the flirting couple, the kissing couple, and here we have the couple coming out of the church, and then before you know it, we have the father pushing the stroller. And so here's that middle ground. That's, the important middle part of that painting. And notice how the clouds really kind of, the fingers of the clouds extend across the land and cast their dark shadows onto the landscape, sort of blocking the sun from those happy, sunny activities. And here's the sky. And then the sky is, helps to create that sense of space with those clouds that were, kind of looming up above, going from the upper right to the sort of middle left, from the top, and then from the middle going back, both planes creating a sense of space, both planes based on the idea of perspective, where things get smaller as they go farther back in space and they move towards a horizon line. And this, it lets us know that we're in a rational world, a predictable world. And in my painting, it's a combination of the rational with the subconscious, with the perceived. And here's that finished painting, Stormy Monday. It's a narrative painting. It represents sort of a cycle of life with the figures. It's sort of very sunny and well structured down below and much more threatening up above, though both the top and the bottom use perspective to help create a predictable sense of space. The roads help to create a sense of space moving back. And so we have that sense of the placid suburban life, which is sort of threatened by this, massive storm that's moving in. And we find that in our own lives where, things are very pleasant and well structured. We try to, manage our lives in a very disciplined and structured way. But even into the most structured lives, unexpected events happen. Threats loom, difficulties emerge that we have to deal with. And I think that's an important part of how we live our lives, is that, yes, we want it to be happy, structured, predictable, pleasant, but then we also have to understand that even in the most pleasant and predictable lives, difficulties are going to emerge, storms are going to march in, and we're going to have to deal with that. And those storms and those difficulties are going to either make us stronger or they're going to make us weaker. But, and we can choose. Will they make us stronger? We can decide that for ourselves. And so here's that painting that represents that. It's called Stormy Monday, oil on canvas, 42 inches high by 26 inches wide. And, there it is on the easel behind me. And like I said, this was not an easy picture to paint. Okay? Halfway through, I was tearing my hair out because it just looked so awful. It took me about 3 months to paint it. But I can tell you, about halfway through, I would walk into the studio and I'd look at this and I'd say, oh, God, that is the worst painting I've ever seen in my entire life. But I kept at it. I kept working at it. And, and if you're an artist, I would encourage you, to keep working at that painting, working at that picture, or whatever activity you're involved with in your lives. Don't give up. Keep at it. Sometimes, halfway through is when it's the worst. And I remember someone telling me about that, about camping trips or yachting trips. That it's always the halfway point that people are most upset. But here's this painting. It represents, a stormy Monday, the storms that can enter our placid suburban world. Well, thank you for watching this video and letting me talk to you about how I painted this picture which is a perceptual picture, a surrealist picture, and a visionary work because it was done from the imagination. But thanks for watching. And if you wouldn't mind, subscribe, leave a comment. I read all the comments, and when you like these videos, the algorithm, the YouTube algorithm takes note of that, and it helps to spread these videos around, and it helps me to make more of them in the future. But thanks for watching.
If you like this video, be sure to subscribe, like, and share.
And don't forget to ring the bell.